One trade changed her life, and the cowboy's silent heart awoke in a dusty square of Santa Helena. An 18-year-old girl was traded for a horse. Dragged before mocking eyes, she stumbled, whispering through tears, "I am not for sale." The crowd laughed until a shadow rose on the horizon. A cowboy dismounted, silent yet fierce. With one strike of his hand, he cleared her family's debt, declaring, "She's not yours." The square fell silent. Maria lifted her face, trembling yet brave. "My name is Maria Clara." The cowboy stepped forward, his voice steady as the earth. "She is safe, as long as I breathe." And in that moment, beneath the dying sun, a story of shame turned into one of courage, a tale the town would never forget. The dry wind lashed against her face, sweeping red dust across the dirt roads of Santa Helena. The frontier village had never known peace. Endless droughts had drained every trace of green, leaving fields cracked open like the wrinkled skin of an aging earth. People survived on shriveled corn, on a few dry beans, on scrawny chickens reduced to skin and bone. Each meal was a calculation, and every dry season meant another face-to-face with hunger. In a creaking wooden house at the edge of the village, Maria Clara sat huddled in a kitchen corner. She was 18, small in stature, her brown eyes heavy with sorrow, as if carrying all the grief of the land itself. The faded cotton dress on her shoulders had been patched countless times, her mother's clumsy stitches clinging desperately to grant it a few more months of life. Maria heard her father Antonio speaking with someone on the porch, his voice trembling like a man at the edge of a cliff. "Please, just give me more time, one more rainy season." His throat rasped, choked with desperation. Outside, a cold laugh cut through the air, colder than the desert wind. It was Nicanor, the infamous moneylender of Santa Helena. He was known for strangling the poor with ledgers full of numbers sealed with crimson stamps that looked like clotted blood. Miss one payment, and you lost your land. Miss two, and you lost your family to servitude. Time Nicanor's voice was heavy with scorn. "What more do you have to offer, Antonio? This house, that barren land, or perhaps your daughter?" Inside the kitchen, Maria froze. Her blood stopped flowing. His words pierced the thin walls, striking straight into her heart. A deadly silence followed. Then she heard her father's broken whisper, "She's only 18. A cruel laugh echoed, drowning out the wind. "All the better. A young girl, untouched. I have a strong Marum horse, its coat sleek, its body powerful. A fair trade. You pay your debt, and I gain her." Maria shot to her feet, eyes wide, her body trembling. She could not believe what she had heard. She was not a commodity to be exchanged for a horse. She was Maria Clara, the girl who had grown up on this land, who had once dreamed of leaving Santa Helena to find freedom. Yet now, her very name had been turned into a bargaining chip. Her mother Zulaidi collapsed to the floor, burying her face in her hands as sobs shook her body. Years of hunger, years of tending to sick children had drained her strength. Hope had long since withered from her eyes. Antonio stepped inside his shoulders, bowed as if the sky itself had caved in upon him. He could not meet his daughter's gaze. "Maria," his voice cracked, I have no choice. If not, our whole family will starve. That horse, at least it can plow the fields, draw water, save your brothers and sisters." Maria looked at her father, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. In his eyes, she saw weakness and despair. She did not blame him. for poverty could break even the strongest of men. But her heart ached as though crushed in a merciless grip. Outside, the Marum horse stomped its hooves against the ground, the sound reverberating like the hammer of fate sealing her destiny. The rumor spread quickly through the village. People whispered in the marketplace, in the tavern, on the church steps. Antonio's daughter has been traded for a horse. She is no different than a cow, a goat. They'll wed her as if she were livestock. The cruel gossip encircled Maria like blades pressing in from every side. That night, Maria sat beside the dim flame of an oil lamp. Her mother clasped her hand, calloused fingers trembling. "My child, forgive us. We had no other choice." Maria did not answer. She only stared at the wavering flame, its light dancing across her tear-streaked face. Inside her, a shadow grew of helplessness, of grief, of the injustice that chained her life. But deep within those brown eyes, a faint spark glimmered like an ember clinging to life in a storm of sand. A spark no one could extinguish. A spark that would grow into a blaze strong enough to burn away the vile truth of Santa Helena. Part 1. Debt and Dignity. The rickety wooden house on the edge of Santa Helena sank into the harsh red of evening. Gaps in the walls let dry gusts howl through, carrying dust deep into the kitchen. The smell of mildew mixed with wood smoke, making the air thick and heavy, like the poverty that clung to the family. Zuleida Maria's mother sat collapsed on the dirt floor, her hands clenched over her hollow face as sobs burst out like a dam cracking. She had cried so many times before, but this time her tears were not only fear, they were the despair of someone facing the inevitable. In the middle of the house, Antonio, the man the village had once called as solid as ironwood, knelt before Nicanor. He was no longer the steadfast pillar. He was a fallen father, his rough hands gripping the hem of the moneylender's coat. Sweat beaded on his forehead, mixing with grime running down a sun-darkened face now shadowed by helplessness. Nicanor sat upright on a creaking wooden chair, but carried himself like a man on a throne. A dark cloak hid most of his hulking frame, polished boots thrown casually forward, and a thin gold chain flashed at his throat like a display of power. In his hand was a thick ledger, pages crowded with red numbers, like congealed blood proof of how tightly he squeezed the poor of the region. His voice rang out, smooth and cold as a sharpened blade. "Antonio, you're 3 seasons behind. Barren land, dead cattle, your youngest always sick. I gave you 2 extensions. Now it's over. What have you left to pay me with?" Antonio bowed his head, shoulders trembling. "Please, give me one more harvest, just one more. I swear I'll pay the principal and the interest." His voice broke, swallowed by despair. Nicanor let out a scornful chuckle, a metallic sound that scraped like metal on stone. He leaned forward, using the pen's handle to lift Antonio's chin, forcing him to meet a gaze as cold as ice. "You've nothing of value left, except..." His eyes slid toward the kitchen corner. There, Maria sat pressed against the wall, her hands clenched together. Her dark hair was hastily tied, falling around a thin face and wide eyes that shone with panic. She tried to avoid his stare, but it clung to her like talons. Your daughter Nicanor emphasized the corner of his mouth, twisting into a merciless smile. 18 years old, untouched. I have a Marum horse, strong, sleek-coated. A fair trade. You clear your debt. I take her. In that instant, the house seemed to collapse. Zuleida let out a tear-soaked scream and lunged forward, dropping to her knees before her husband and the creditor clutching at the patched skirt. No, my child is my blood. You have no right. But Nicanor only smiled thinly, the expression of one who knows he holds life and death in his hands. Blood. In Santa Helena, blood does not pay debts. Debt is debt. Antonio knows that well. Antonio bowed his face. Tears fell onto the dirt floor. He raised his head to look at his daughter, eyes rimmed red with regret and a pain beyond words. Maria. His voice choked. I have no other path. If not, we will lose everything. Your siblings. They will starve. Maria sprang up, her face streaked with tears, but a fire of anger flared in her gaze. Father, I am not merchandise. I'd rather die than be traded for a horse. Nicanor rose his shadow, swallowing the light in the small house. He braced both hands on the table and leaned toward Maria. His cruel smile chilled the room. Die death would be easy for you. I will take you, and all of Santa Helena will witness it. They will remember forever a horse for a girl. They will laugh at your family for generations. Zuleida's cries tore the air. Antonio's feeble pleas dissolved into nothing, while Nicanor's heartless laughter echoed like a curse. Outside, the Marome horse neighed, each hoofbeat striking the earth like a hammer, sealing Maria's fate. She stepped back, her whole body trembling, yet her eyes reflected an unusual light. It was not merely fear, it was the flame of resistance, the flame of a soul that refused to bow, even as the whole world cornered her. Darkness began to swallow Santa Helena. The oil lamp guttered in the wooden house, casting Maria's thin silhouette onto the wall. A small figure shaking yet radiant like a candle in a storm. That night, while the village sank into weary sleep, Maria sat upright by the dying embers, her eyes fixed on the void. Inside, her echoed a painful question. If the price of life is my very self, is it worth it? And somewhere, in the thick night that cloaked Santa Helena, fate began to turn, setting Maria on a path toward the fateful meeting with the cowboy who would change everything. Part 2. The cowboy appears. The Santa Helena Square in the late afternoon blazed beneath a crimson sun. Dust swirled with every gust of wind, clinging to faces and clothes, making the scene all the more suffocating. Villagers had gathered early, some leaning on hoes, others lounging on the church steps, women huddling together in whispers. All had come to watch the sordid play that fate had arranged. A young girl bartered for a horse to erase a debt. Maria Clara was dragged into the crowd's center. Her faded dress whipped in the wind, her bare feet coated in dust. Fingers pointed, whispers spread. Some chuckled with cruel delight. Others shook their heads with pity, but dared not speak aloud. Maria kept her face down, tears streaking her cheeks, her body trembling like a leaf before the storm. High above, Nicanor stood proudly, like a victor, hand gripping the reins of the Marome horse, his lips curled into a smug grin. Look, a woman muttered, a whole life for a single horse. Cheaper than a sack of corn, a man sneered, his laughter sharp as a blade. Each word stabbed Maria's ears like needles. She wanted to scream, to flee, but her legs felt bound to the burning red earth. Injustice closed around her soul, strangling every breath. Then suddenly, the thunder of hooves broke through the silence echoing from afar. Heads turned. Through a cloud of dust emerged a tall, dark figure astride a black horse riding toward the square. The man sat straight, a leather cloak billowing behind him, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing half his face. Every hoofbeat struck like a drum on the villagers' hearts, heralding something different, something dangerous. The crowd parted, opening a path. The horse stopped dust, curling in a halo around the cowboy's silhouette. For a moment, no one dared breathe. The man slowly pulled off his gloves and dismounted. His boots, caked with dry dust, struck the square with force. He did not look at the villagers, nor at Nicanor, but straight at Maria. His deep eyes, silent yet unyielding, glimmered with the knowledge of loss and injustice. He was João Batista, the man Santa Helena spoke of in half respect, half rumor. They said he was a widower, living in seclusion on the Salento ranch. They whispered he was ruthless, that he bought people to fill the emptiness in his heart. But in that moment, no rumor mattered. João stepped forward and slammed a thick envelope onto the wooden table before Nicanor. The crack echoed like a gunshot, making the crowd flinch. The debt is paid. His voice was steady, deep resonant, a sentence handed down. Nicanor froze, the smirk fading into a dark scowl. "And who do you think you are to meddle in my affairs?" João did not flinch. His gaze remained calm, unshaken. He leaned slightly toward Maria, his body a wall shielding her from the storm. "She is not yours? She is not merchandise. No human life can be traded for an animal." The crowd stirred. Murmurs rippled like waves. Some stared in shock. Others shifted uneasily. A few eyes flickered with hope. João's words had cut through the heavy shroud smothering Maria's heart. She lifted her head, her tearful eyes meeting his unwavering gaze. In that instant, Maria felt she was not completely alone. A fragile light pierced the dust cloud of shame and injustice. Nicanor's voice hardened, forcing down his rage. "They'll say you bought her. Do you want that stain on your name, João Batista?" João seized the envelope and slammed it down again, the sound louder, sharper. "Let them talk. Honor does not lie in another man's mouth, it lies in truth. And the truth is, the debt is erased. She is free." The evening wind swept across the square, carrying red dust over every face. Maria's heart pounded. For the first time since she had been thrust into this vile bargain, she felt a spark of hope, fragile but warm enough to keep the darkness from consuming her. That day, Santa Helena witnessed a scene it had never seen before. The infamous moneylender challenged in the heart of the square, and the poor girl traded for a horse shielded by the silent strength of a cowboy. From that moment, Maria Clara's story was no longer just a tragedy. It had begun to shift into something else, a journey she herself could hardly believe she might live to walk. Part 3. Fazenda Salento night fell over Santa Helena like a heavy velvet curtain. After the uproar in the square, João Batista's black horse carried Maria along endless red dirt roads, winding through barren hills. The night wind bit cold, carrying the parched scent of earth and the sharp tang of wild grass. Maria sat behind him, clutching the saddle, her heart still pounding with the echoes of what had just happened. She could not yet believe that a man had stood up for her, paid her family's debt, and led her away from that place of shame. Fazenda Salento appeared after a bend in the road, a vast ranch nestled among rows of towering chinaberry trees. The main wooden house, its tiled roof old but sturdy, glowed with the soft yellow of oil lamps. In the distance stood horse stables and white fences glimmering under the moonlight. The neighing of horses mingled with the chirping of crickets, forming a night symphony of peace, so different from the chaos of the square. Juon stopped his horse at the porch. Maria hesitated, not stepping down her eyes, uncertain, her legs trembling. Everything felt unfamiliar. She had never left her rickety home, never seen a house with solid wooden doors and windows still intact. The door opened. Dona Izora, the ranch's old housekeeper, appeared, a stout woman with kind eyes beneath a forehead lined with years. She held an oil lamp and spoke warmly. "Master, is this the girl everyone in the village gossiped about today?" Juon gave a slight nod, his face unchanged. "From now on, she stays here. Prepare a room for her." Maria looked up, her eyes wide. A room of her own. She had never even imagined such a thing. Since childhood, she had slept on straw with her younger siblings, huddling together in the driest corner whenever the roof leaked. Now, a room just for her, it sounded like a dream. Dona Isaura smiled gently and took Maria's hand. "Come, child. Here you will be safe." The wooden hallway creaked under their steps. The lamplight flickered on the walls, stretching Maria's thin shadow. The woman led her into a small, neat room, a single wooden bed, with a thin mattress, a worn but clean wool blanket, a wooden table by the window, and a small shelf holding a few tattered books. Another oil lamp glowed warmly, casting golden light that chased away the chill. Maria froze, unable to believe it was real. She touched the blanket. Its strange softness brought tears to her eyes. For years she had only known the cold nights on hard straw. She turned, her voice trembling. This is for me." Dona Isaura nodded, her eyes kind. "Yes. From now on, this is your room. And remember, child, no one has the right to measure your worth against a horse." Maria burst into tears, clinging to the woman like a lost child. In that embrace, she felt for the first time something she had never known: safety. That night, Maria lay on her new bed, staring at the ceiling. The lamp still burned, spreading warm light. She heard the wind outside the horses in their stalls, and inside her rose a new feeling. Not only fear, but something warmer, like a fragile spark of hope. The next morning, with dawn still tangled in mist, Maria was called to the kitchen. Dona Isaura laid out a simple breakfast: cornbread, a little warm milk. Maria had never eaten so much at once. She held the cup with trembling hands, whispering a faint thank you. Juon appeared at the door. His gaze was still steady, but no longer as harsh as in the square. He looked at Maria and spoke calmly. "Do you know how to read and write?" Maria lowered her head, murmuring, "No. My father never let me. I had to work at home." Juon nodded slightly, then placed a thin book on the table. "From now on, you will learn. Isaura will teach you. I did not bring you here to make you my wife. I brought you here to give you another chance. Do you understand?" Maria froze, her heart racing. His words echoed in her mind, each syllable like cool water falling on parched earth. "I did not buy you. I am giving you another chance." In the days that followed, life at Fazenda São Bento unfolded before her like an entirely new world. In the mornings, she studied letters with Dona Isaura. The crooked shapes she first traced made her both embarrassed and excited. Each time she got it right, Isaura patted her hand with pride, like a mother with a child. In the afternoons, she helped sweep, cook, and sometimes watched the peons care for the horses. Maria began reading from old books, from worn-out pages of the Bible. At night, her small room glowed late into the hours. Maria sat at the wooden table. Her eyes, bright as letters, came alive before her. The oil lamp's golden warmth drove away the cold shadows. Each word she spelled, each sentence she copied, was a stone laid in the foundation of a new life. Maria began to smile more, though shyly. She no longer startled at the sound of horses, no longer felt like prey, waiting to be devoured. Instead, she felt something new here. There was a space that belonged to her, a place where injustice could not yet reach. And most of all, for the first time, Maria Clara felt she had worth. Not a worth measured by the price of a horse, but the worth of being herself, a human being. One night, while writing her first words on paper, Maria looked up and smiled faintly. Outside, the wind was still cold, but in her room, the oil lamp burned warm and steady. She knew the road ahead would be long, full of trials. But at least at Fazenda Salento, she had a place to begin again, a true home, a safe haven to start over. Part 4. Rumors and the Ghosts of the Past. On Sunday morning, the bell of Santa Helena Church rang out, its long peal rolling over the mossy tiled roofs and across the parched fields. Villagers, old and young men and women, gathered in the square before the church, bringing with them faith, curiosity, and all the half-spoken rumors that had accumulated over the week. In a place like Santa Helena, news traveled faster than the wind, and gossip had the power to destroy even more surely than hunger. Maria Clara emerged from the church with Dona Isaura. She wore a simple cotton dress that Isaura had carefully mended. Her black hair was neatly tied, and her eyes were fixed downward to avoid the prying stares that surrounded her. She hurried her steps, yet her feet felt nailed to the ground by dozens of heavy looks. "There she is," a woman whispered loudly enough for others to hear. "The girl João Batista spent a fortune on. Who buys a wife like you'd buy a horse?" Another man snorted, a hint of cruelty in his voice. "If he bought her, she's his now. She'll be paying her debt in bed, mark my words." The titters and jeers threaded into Maria's ears like sharp blades. She wished to scream, to run, but shame pinned her in place. Every word cut into the humiliation that had taken root since her father had bartered her away. Dona Isaura squeezed Maria's hand and murmured, "Don't mind them, child. They speak, but they know nothing." Yet even that warm hand could not stop the tears swelling in Maria's eyes. At the market, the situation grew worse. Stalls and hawkers' cries faded beneath the stream of whispers. Wherever Maria walked, people watched not with innocent curiosity, but with judgment and contempt. That girl's lost her honor, a beetle-chewing butcher proclaimed, his mouth stained red. No one will marry the one who was traded for a horse. But I heard João paid off the debt and left her untouched. He just keeps her at the house to feed and teach her. A young woman selling cloth interjected. The butcher laughed loudly and spat beetle onto the ground. What a joke. Which man brings a pretty young girl home and doesn't touch her? He's only pretending for show. Who knows what he does at night? Their coarse laughter reverberated through Maria's bones. She stared at the ground, her cheeks burning with shame. For a moment, she wished she could vanish like a speck of dust in the wind, unseen, unremembered. but the ghosts of the past would not release her. Every step along the red dirt road echoed Nicanor's cruel bargaining, the villagers' derisive laughter, and her father's helpless, choked voice. Those sounds braided together into a relentless loop, imprisoning her in an inescapable shame. At night, Maria sat alone in her small room at Fazenda Salento. The oil lamp burned its warm light, painting the walls, but her inner world remained dark. She put pen to paper and tried to write the letters she had learned, but her hand shook and tears blurred the lines. She whispered to herself, as if to ward off the noise outside, "My name is Maria Clara. I am not merchandise. I am not a debt." But the whisper dissolved, drowned by the rumor mill beyond the gate. João Batista remained silent. He offered no explanations, no defenses, and seemed unconcerned by the gossip. He lived as before morning work, in the fields, midday, tending the stables, evenings reading the Bible under lamplight. His silence only reinforced the villagers' certainty to them. Silence was admission. To Maria, that silence was another invisible blade cutting at her already tattered dignity. At times, she hated him. Why did he not stand up and tell everyone the truth? Why did he not declare he had not bought a wife, but had only cleared a debt to save an innocent girl? Why did he leave her to be tormented by whispers? Yet when she looked into his quiet eyes, she saw another pain, a deep, unnamed sorrow. It was as if he, too, had known the stings of rumor and the weight of judgment, and now his silence was his only shield. Maria withdrew further into herself, speaking and smiling less. Each time she ventured outside, she felt the world press its contempt upon her. Even returning to the warm little room at the ranch did not free her from the heavy cloak of shame. Her body was safe, but her spirit felt chained in the cage of public opinion. One night, sitting by the window, overlooking the moonlit yard, she whispered, voice-breaking, "If a person's honor can be stolen so easily, then what is the point of living?" The question drifted into the dark, quiet, and aching, and found no answer. Part 5. The Secret Chest. The night in Santa Helena was hauntingly still. The moon hung suspended above, casting its silvery glow over the weathered tiles of Fazenda Salento. In that eerie calm, Maria Clara could not sleep. The cruel rumors from the market, the scornful glances at the church, and João's unfathomable silence all echoed relentlessly in her mind. The harder she tried to push them away, the tighter they coiled around her, strangling her breath like wild vines. She sat up, pulled a thin shawl over her shoulders, and stepped into the corridor. The wind whistled through the cracks of the doors, sounding like ghostly whispers. Guided only by the wavering light of her oil lamp, she followed the wooden path until her feet carried her, as if by instinct, to the old storage barn behind the ranch. The workers avoided it, believing it to be haunted by misfortunes of the past. The wooden door groaned as Maria pushed it open. A pungent stench of mold rose sharply, mingled with the smell of rotting wood and musty cloth. The flickering lamp revealed piles of worn sacks, rusting tools, and thick cobwebs. Every hair on her neck bristled, yet something urged her onward. There was a secret buried here. In the far corner, beneath layers of dust, she spotted an old wooden chest with a corroded lock. It sat motionless, as though it had waited decades for someone to open it. Maria's heartbeat thundered in her chest. Kneeling, She tapped it lightly. The solid echo was unlike the hollow crates around it. For a moment, she swore she heard the wind moan outside, and a chill swept over her spine as if unseen eyes were watching. She took a deep breath, braced herself, and forced the brittle lock. It snapped with a dry crack. She lifted the lid, and a cloud of dust burst upward, making her cough. The lamplight fell onto stacks of papers, a few personal belongings, and a worn leather-bound notebook. Maria carefully shuffled through the documents. On the first sheet, the writing spelled out, "Debt note, Antonio de Souza." Her heart constricted. These were the contracts Nicanor had used to trap her father. But on closer inspection, she noticed something strange. The crimson seals didn't match. The signatures looked clumsy forged. As she turned more pages, she found the same patterns, fraudulent marks, counterfeit debts. A horrifying truth dawned on her. Nicanor had not only charged usurious interest, he had fabricated debts to drive families like hers into ruin. Her hands trembled violently, sweat beading despite the cold. She felt she had stumbled upon a secret no one was ever meant to uncover. Deeper in the chest lay a bundle of old letters yellowed with age. Maria unfolded one and froze at the familiar name Helena Batista, Joan's late wife. The hurried, shaky handwriting described her final days before her fatal accident. It told of a fall during a horse ride, the cincha strap giving way. But at the end, Helena hinted at something darker suspicion that someone had tampered with her saddle. Maria dropped the letter, her whole body turning cold. Could it be that not only had her family been destroyed by forged debts, but Joan's wife had also fallen victim to the same corrupt hand? She recalled Joan's somber eyes heavy with unnamed sorrow. Did he know? Or was he too a victim of the same shadowy scheme? The oil lamp flickered, and the barn seemed to grow darker. Maria clutched the notebook and debt papers to her chest, shuddering. Part of her wanted to shove everything back close to the chest and pretend she had seen nothing. But another part burned with conviction. This was the key to truth, the weapon to break the chains of shame that bound her. Suddenly, dogs barked outside, followed by the sharp clatter of hooves on the courtyard. Maria gasped, hastily blew out the lamp, and hugged the papers against her heart, holding her breath. In the suffocating darkness, every sound sharpened the wind. The rustle of dry leaves, the steady tread of boots approaching. The barn door swung open, flooding the room with lantern light. Maria squeezed her eyes shut, her heart ready to burst. It was Joan. His tall frame filled the doorway, casting a long shadow across the dusty floor. His gaze flicked to the open chest, then to Maria, lingering in heavy silence. "You shouldn't be here at this hour," he said, his voice low and rough, not scolding, but heavy with unease. Maria clutched the papers tightly, feeling as though she now held the darkest secret of Santa Helena. She longed to speak, but her throat closed tight. All she could do was meet Joan's eyes, trembling eyes that held ghosts of the past, neither of them yet dared to name. Part 6. A Tear-Stained Confession. The night in Santa Helena hung heavy like a mourning shroud, with only a thin moon casting its pale light over scattered rooftops. At the end of the dirt road, tucked behind a row of dry cacti, stood the tavern. On most nights, it rang with guitar music and the rowdy laughter of peons after long hours of work. But tonight, it was eerily still. Only a flickering oil lamp swayed in the gloom, Smoke curled above, and the bitter stench of liquor weighed in the air. João Batista sat in a corner at a wooden table, his posture upright, but his eyes lost in thought. Across from him were two men, Severino, the gray-haired foreman, and Adalto, a young ranch hand whose gaze never held steady. Both looked gaunt, haunted by a secret they had carried far too long. João poured cachaça into 3 cups and slid 2 toward them. His voice was low, firm. "Tonight, I want no more excuses. Only the truth." Severino's hand trembled as he lifted the cup, swallowed, and set it down again. His eyes glistened, his chest heaving as if bracing to release the burden that had crushed him for years. "Master," his voice cracked rough as gravel, "Helena's death, it wasn't an accident." João's hand tightened, his fingers trembling against the rim of his cup. The air seemed to freeze. Severino continued, each word cutting like a blade. That day, her cincha strap didn't come loose on its own. It was cut. I saw the knife marks with my own eyes. But I stayed silent. I was a coward. I feared for my life. Feared Nicanor's revenge. Adalto, the young man, hunched over, sweat pouring through the night, was cold. He clasped his hands, shaking his voice, breaking like a boy trapped in terror. It was me. I was ordered to do it. Celestino Nicanor's right hand made me cut the strap. He said if I refused, my family would be thrown off the land. I couldn't resist. And I cut it. The last words shattered him. Adalto broke into sobs, the sound echoing painfully through the empty tavern. João's face drained of color. His fists clenched so tight, his knuckles whitened. For years he had believed his wife's death, the woman he had loved above all, was a tragic accident. Now, the naked truth blazed before him. It had been murder. A calculated act of cruelty. Severino bowed his head, his voice ragged with remorse. I should have spoken long ago. But Nicanor has eyes and ears everywhere. He spares no one who dares betray him. I left you to live with unjust grief. I deserve no forgiveness. João closed his eyes. Memories surged like a storm. Helena's smile on that last day, her hair flying as she rode across the fields, then the piercing scream as her horse collapsed beneath her. Now the pieces fit together, bound by a bitter truth: someone had stolen her life. Maria, who had sat silently at João's side, clutched the bundle of forged contracts she had found in the chest. Her wide eyes filled with tears, her hands trembling. The puzzle was complete. The falsified debts, the staged accident, the web of Nicanor's schemes. All of Santa Helena had been ensnared by his filthy hands. For a long moment, silence reigned, broken only by Adalto's sobs and the hiss of wind through the cracks. Then João opened his eyes, and they burned with fire beneath the calm. He rose, his voice deep, each word striking like a hammer. From this day forward, this truth will no longer remain buried. Helena was murdered by evil hands, and Maria Antonio's daughter nearly became the next victim. I will not let it happen again. Justice will have its voice. Severino bent low, tears streaming. Adalto buried his face in his hands, begging forgiveness. Maria's throat tightened. Her vision blurred, her chest heaving with sobs. When she looked at João, she saw not only the anguish of loss, but a fierce strength kindled from a wounded heart. That night, in the hollow silence of the tavern, tear-stained confessions reshaped everything. What had been dismissed as accident, what had been treated as barter, was now exposed as evidence and indictment against Nicanor's cruelty. Outside, The moon sank behind the hills, seeding the sky to dawn, a dawn that carried not just light, but the promise of an awakening of a truth, rising cleansed in blood and tears, and in the courage to face the shadows. Part 7. The night before the trial. The night at Fazenda, Salento, was unusually quiet. The moon had sunk behind the mountains, leaving only a scatter of stars glittering across the sky, casting their faint glow upon the red-tiled roof of the wooden house. The wind from the plains blew cool and fresh, yet it carried with it the weight of something inevitable drawing near. Tomorrow, the square of Santa Helena would host a public trial where the truth would finally come to light. But tonight, everything seemed suspended so tense that even the rustling of leaves made Maria flinch. In her small room, Maria sat at the wooden table, her ink pen trembling in her hand. The oil lamp cast a gentle golden light, her shadow flickering on the wall. Before her lay the journal Isora had given her, saying, "Write, my child, write, and your heart will feel lighter." Maria lowered the pen. Awkward letters formed across the page lines, crooked yet soaked in tears. She wrote of the day her father knelt before Nicanor, of her mother's sobs, of the villagers' scorn, and of the moment João appeared, slamming the envelope onto the table like a beam of light piercing the dark. She wrote of the secret chest, of the forged contracts of Helena's letter, and of the tear-stained confessions in the tavern. Each word was a release, her heart pouring out onto the page. But the more she wrote, the more her tears blurred the ink. She stopped covering her face with her hands, whispering through sobs, "Tomorrow, everything will change. Will I have the courage?" A soft knock sounded at the door. Maria hastily wiped her tears and closed the journal. The door opened and João Batista entered. He still wore his dark shirt sleeves, rolled up his weathered face lined by the years. Yet in the lamplight, he looked more weary than ever, as though bearing the weight of memories too heavy to carry. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice low and husky. Maria nodded faintly. "Tomorrow, I'm afraid." João sat across from her, his gaze settling on the flicker of the lamp. He stayed silent so long that Maria thought he would say nothing. But at last, his voice broke the stillness, deep and rough. "The day Helena died, I too was afraid. Afraid of the truth, afraid of facing loss. People said it was an accident. I wanted to believe them, because otherwise, I would have gone mad. But the truth, no matter how much we turn away, always stands there. Like the night outside, the more we close our eyes, the more it surrounds us." Maria held her breath, watching him. For the first time, João spoke of his wife. The hardness in his eyes dissolved, revealing a grief that had burned quietly for years. He let out a bitter laugh, cracked and broken. "They say I am cold, ruthless, but the truth is, I was just a man who lost everything, who no longer knew why he lived. Until the day I saw Antonio's daughter being bartered for a horse. I realized if I let another life be buried under filth, then I was no better than the men who destroyed mine." Maria's eyes stung. She no longer saw him as a distant, unyielding man, but as a wounded soul, as broken as she was. She rose, stepped closer, and placed her trembling hand on his calloused one. "Senor João." Her voice caught. "I understand now. You lost Helena. I lost my honor, my faith. But maybe God brought us together, so we could rise again." João lifted his gaze, his dark eyes reflecting the lamplight. For the first time, Maria saw not just sorrow, but a glimmer, the light of shared understanding, of two shattered souls daring to believe in tomorrow. Silence stretched, filled only by the wind rustling the fields outside like a mournful lullaby. In that small room, their hands held tight, not the grip of possession, but the clasp of two souls seeking strength in each other. Maria whispered, "Tomorrow I will stand. I will say my name before all of Santa Helena. But I can only do it because I know I am not alone." Joan nodded slowly, "And I will stand beside you. Even if the whole world turns away, I will not let you face it alone." That night, Maria slept soundly for the first time. In her dream, she stood in the square, no longer bowed, no longer weeping. She felt Joan's steady gaze upon her solid as ironwood, and in her heart, she heard a vow resound. Tomorrow justice will speak. Part 8. Justice in Santa Helena. That morning, the square of Santa Helena overflowed with people. From weary farmers and widows, hardened by loss, to restless youths, hungry for spectacle, all pressed together, jostling for a place to see. The church bell tolled long and solemn across the pale sky, announcing a day unlike any other, the day justice would be named. On a wooden platform hastily built the parish priest, and the village elders sat stern like judges unwilling to bend. Below them, Nicanor's face flushed red, his mouth twisted in a mocking grin, his stance defiant. Beside him lurked his usual henchmen, their eyes darting nervously, though arrogance still clung to them. Across from him stood João Batista, tall and unyielding his frame, casting a shadow over the ground. At his side walked Maria Clara, her black hair tied neatly, her eyes steady, though trembling with the weight of what she was about to face. Whispers surged through the crowd. "There she is. The girl traded for a horse. João Batista brought her home. And now, what's this game? Looks like today will be worth watching." João raised his chin and laid a thick bundle of papers on the wooden table, bound tightly with rope. As he spread them open, worn contracts appeared. Their red seals smudged their signatures clearly forged. A collective gasp rippled through the square. "This is the evidence," João declared, his voice resonant firm as hammer-striking nail. Nicanor was not only a usurer. He fabricated debts driving the people of Santa Helena to ruin, making slaves of them on their own land. An elder furrowed his brow, lifting one sheet to the sunlight. The sloppy letters and counterfeit seal were plain to see. The council murmured, nodding grimly. Below the crowd erupted a wave of anger and recognition. Farmers who had lost their land, men who had lost cattle, women who had lost children to indenture, now realized it had all been part of a vile fraud. Nicanor roared, "Lies, all of it. Forgeries. What right does a cowboy and a bought girl have to accuse me?" The murmurs ceased. Every gaze turned to Maria. In that moment, her legs felt as if they might collapse. But when she glanced to her side, João's eyes met hers, calm, solid, anchoring her in the storm. Maria drew a deep breath and stepped forward. Her voice trembled, but rang clear. "I am Maria Clara, daughter of Antonio. I am not merchandise. I am not a debt. I am a human being." Her words cut through the square. The crowd fell silent, then murmured again. Tears glistened in her eyes, but her resolve did not falter. "The day my father knelt, I was bartered for a horse. People mocked me, called me cheap, worthless. But today, I stand here to say the dignity of a human being cannot be priced. I was not sold. I was not bought. I survived to speak the truth." Tears streamed down her cheeks, yet her voice grew stronger. Among the crowd, women bowed their heads, wiping their eyes. Men who had long stayed silent against injustice now clenched their fists, teeth gritted. Juon placed a worn leather journal on the table. His voice thundered, "This is the diary of Helena, my wife. She did not die by accident. Her cincha strap was cut. Severino and Adalto have confessed. All of it was ordered by Nicanor." The crowd exploded. Shouts, curses, invocations of God shook the square. Rage ignited every face, every eye turned on Nicanor. The man who had once ruled over them with fear now turned pale, sweat dripping his sneer, collapsing into a grimace of terror. The elder stood raising his hand for silence. His voice carried clear and resolute. Santa Helena has no place for those who trample the truth. From this day forth, every debt contract made by Nicanor is void. He shall be imprisoned to await judgment under the law. A cheer thundered rolling like a storm. Voices shouted Maria's name, Juon's name. The crowd surged, men clapping shoulders, women embracing laughter, and cries mingling in long-suppressed release. Years of oppression shattered in a single moment. Justice for the first time had risen in the heart of the village. Maria stood still, tears flowing not of shame as before, but of freedom. She lifted her face to the sky, her eyes gleaming in the morning sun, whispering, "I am no longer a debt. I am myself." Juon laid a firm hand on her shoulder. No words were needed in that touch. Lay recognition, solidarity, and a promise that she would never again stand alone. That day, the square of Santa Helena bore witness to a truth. Justice may come late, but when it speaks, it sets everyone free. Part 9. My name is Maria Clara. The roar of celebration in Santa Helena's square slowly faded after Nicanor was dragged away in chains. Noon sunlight blazed upon the moss-covered rooftops, reflecting on the faces of villagers who had just lived through an earthquake of justice. They clustered together, some laughing, some crying, as though they had witnessed the fall of a tyrant. In the center of that throng stood Maria Clara. Her heart pounded each beat, echoing the years she had endured in silence and humiliation. The cruel whispers still haunted her memory. The girl traded for a horse, a worthless commodity. Yet today, in the light of justice, a new strength surged within her. She was no longer an object, no longer a debt, no longer a shadow of disgrace. The villagers gathered around, calling her name with both curiosity and awe. An old woman hobbled forward on her cane, her trembling hand clutching Maria's as she whispered, "My child, you are brave. But what now? Where will you live? Who will you depend on?" A man pushed through, sneering, "She'll still have to be someone's wife. A woman without a husband can't survive." Murmurs rippled again. Some suggested Juon should marry her to wash away the gossip. Others scoffed, saying she was nothing more than a dowry fallen from Nicanor's hands into Juon's. Maria's chest tightened, but this time she did not bow her head. She drew in a deep breath, stepped into the circle of people, and raised her voice. Listen well. Her tone rang clear, no longer trembling, but strong as the church bell. My name is Maria Clara. I am not a dowry. I am not a debt. I am not merchandise for anyone to price. The square fell silent, all eyes fixed on her as though for the first time truly seeing her. She pressed on her words, spilling straight from her heart. I was once exchanged for a horse. I once bowed weeping in shame. But today, I choose freedom. I do not belong to anyone but myself. I will learn. I will live. And I will rebuild my honor with my own hands. The wind swept dry leaves across the ground. Then a lone clap rose from a young mother holding a child in her arms. Another followed, then more. Applause spread through the square, swelling into cheers, not only for João, but for Maria, the girl who had risen from the mud to stand tall. João stood at her side, his eyes steady, quietly proud. He did not speak, did not shield her, did not claim her. He let Maria's voice be her own, and that was her truest victory. A group of men approached the parish priest among them. He looked at Maria, his tone solemn. "Child, the choice you make will bring hardships. Are you certain you are strong enough?" Maria lifted her head, tears shimmering, but her lips curved in a steady smile. "I was once treated as worthless. If I survived that, then no hardship will break me." The villagers nodded in silence. They realized that the girl they had mocked and dismissed now stood stronger than they had ever imagined. As the afternoon waned and the square emptied, Maria walked slowly toward João's wooden house. Along the red dirt road, children scampered after her, chattering, "Maria Clara, you're free now. Will you teach us to read?" Maria bent down, caressing the youngest child's head. Her voice was gentle, yet resolute. "Yes, I will teach you. None of us were born to be sold or bought. We were born to live free." The setting sun painted the dry fields in gold. In that light, Maria Clara's shadow stretched long, no longer frail and trembling, but strong and upright. The shadow of a woman who had reclaimed her dignity and planted seeds of hope for all of Santa Helena. That night she sat in her room and opened her journal. Beneath the crooked lines of earlier entries, she wrote a new sentence, bold and certain. "Today, I was born again. My name is Maria Clara." And for the first time in her life, as she wrote her name, Maria felt her heart full of peace, warmth, and light. Part 10. The Choice of the Heart. Evening descended over Santa Helena, the sky ablaze like a ribbon of fire stretching across the horizon. The endless fields of dry grass glowed amber under the setting sun, the wind whispering through each stalk, carrying with it the solemn rhythm of life on the frontier. In the distance, horses grazed slowly, their shadows stretched long against the twilight, like fragments of memories drifting quietly away. Maria Clara stood on a hilltop, gazing out at the vast expanse. Her simple dress fluttered in the breeze, her dark hair catching the fading light, her eyes deep as though holding the dying sun within them. Days had passed since the public trial, and Santa Helena was changing. The villagers no longer bowed to evil. They began to speak of truth, of freedom. Yet within Maria lingered a question with no answer. What path was truly hers? Behind her hoofbeats sounded firm and steady before stopping. João Batista appeared tall and commanding in the crimson glow. He led his horse, slowly pausing beside Maria. His face was calm as ever, but in his eyes there was a gentleness, as though some of the shadows of his past had finally lifted. Santa Helena has changed. João said, his voice, warm and low, carried by the wind. But what about you, Maria? Will you leave to start anew, or remain on this land? Maria lowered her gaze, nudging a pebble with her foot, watching it roll down the red earth. To leave would mean leaving everything behind, seeking a new life elsewhere. To stay would mean facing the villagers' stares again, but also remaining near João, the man who had stood with her against injustice, the man who had given her back her dignity. At last, she spoke, her voice trembling but resolute. Once I thought freedom was only breaking chains, but now I understand freedom is choosing where my heart belongs. João turned toward her, a spark of light flickering in his eyes. Maria continued, her cheeks flushed under the sunset I have chosen. I will stay, because Santa Helena needs me, and because my heart has found where it belongs. The wind swept across the field, carrying her words far into the distance. João stood silent, his dark eyes trembling with emotion. For years he had believed his heart turned to stone, buried under grief. But now this young woman had brought light back into his life, a gentle, steady flame that warmed a soul he thought long dead. He extended his hand, calloused and rough, trembling like his heart. Maria looked at it, then placed her own hand upon his. A simple touch, yet it thundered in both their chests, like a drumbeat. No vows, no chains, only understanding and a love quietly born. The sun sank. The last light gilded their silhouettes, standing together on the hill. Below, the horses neighed, as if bearing witness to a new beginning. Maria whispered softly, almost to the wind, "My name is Maria Clara, and this time I choose with my heart." João's hand tightened around hers, his lips lifting into a rare smile. In his gaze, Maria saw peace, a peace she had crossed so much darkness to find. Night fell. Stars blossomed across the sky. Santa Helena still held its hardships, but for Maria and João, the road ahead would now be walked together. And their story did not end with a period, but with a door opening onto a new journey, a journey of love, of freedom, and of two hearts that had found one another after so much pain. Dawn washed over Santa Helena, painting the sky soft pink as the first light broke over the barren hills. A rooster crowed in the distance. The wind brushed the plains, cleansing everything, as though after a long storm. Maria Clara rode astride the Marum horse, the very one that had once been the price of her shame. Now it carried her into freedom. Her hair streamed in the wind, her eyes sparkled with morning light. No more tears, no more bowed head, only a radiant young woman who had found herself after all the ruin. Beside her, João led his horse at a steady pace. No longer the brooding cowboy haunted by sorrow, but a man walking into the dawn of a new life. In his eyes, a gentle light reflected from Maria's smile, as though she had awakened the part of him he thought had died. Together, they left Santa Helena behind, the red dust roads, the judging stares, the ghosts of the past. Ahead lay a new land, unknown, but full of promise. The morning wind caressed them. The sun climbed higher, flooding the vast plains with light. Maria lifted her face, breathed deeply, and whispered, "In this harsh west, love and kindness are the only shelter." João glanced at her, his rare smile softening his features, and they pressed onward. The Marum horse neighed its hooves, striking the earth in rhythm like music, bidding farewell to the past. And so their story closed, not with an ending, but with a quiet beginning, where hearts are healed, where freedom and love walk side by side. Leave a comment and rate it from 0 to 10. Subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss the next Wild West ride.